So welcome to our May First Friday event, which is hosted by me today. So the Franchise Company First Friday event, which is designed to be our learning and knowledge platform to share with anyone and everyone involved in franchising, to hopefully learn and meet other people and get to know a lot more about franchising from the guests that we have. The guests that we have on board today are Mark Llewellyn and Terry from Revive, who are a long-standing franchisor, and we're delighted to have them here today to discuss basically their story and their progress with us. So welcome to Mark and Terry, and we're going to start the session by asking you to briefly give us a bit of information about how you actually began the business and the story behind the first time I ever saw you standing in the franchise exhibition at the NEC, and I guess realistically what you'd been up to prior to that, basically, if that's a good place for you to start.
Absolutely. Hello everybody. I'm Mark Llewellyn, Managing Director Sales and Marketing at Revive. Prior to working for myself, I was a reasonable rugby player, and as a young man, that was the most important thing in my life, even though it was amateur in those days. And I ended up playing in France for 5 years and playing in Canada. And it was there that I saw the idea for a Canadian franchise, and I started up the rights to a Canadian master franchise back in the UK. I met Terry as my bank manager, who helped fund that initial startup. And having spent 10 years away from my parents, I returned back to rugby to my parents' house, which they were really delighted about. And I was van number one painting cars. Things moved along okay, and started working with Terry in 2000. In 2004, we moved away from the Canadian business and rebranded to Revive in 2004. And it's really there that the real progress has been made with the business. So prior to starting a business, I really didn't have a massive amount of business experience. I'd done various jobs in different places, but no real significant business experience. I enjoyed talking to people. I'm passionate about customer service. Those are things that are and wanted to do a good job, really. So that's where I came from.
And I'm Terry Mullen. I'm Managing Director of Finance and Operations, and I'm kind of an accidental entrepreneur. I think it wasn't something that I ever thought about when I was young. Or dreamed about being a business owner. So my journey into self-employment, as Mark mentioned, I was a bank manager at NatWest. I started in 1979. I was straight after my A-levels, went into banking up in Cumbria, moved down to the Midlands and worked in the regional lending department. So I specialised in lending at the bank. So I would look at applications from companies up to £10 million facility. I ended up back at the local branch in Rugby when I had my first daughter, who's now well into her 30s and a teacher. And so I was back at the local branch on a job share basis when I came across Mark, who, now all of you who know Mark will know Mark's very bouncy, very persuasive. And at NatWest at the time, because my specialism was lending, I was asked to interview Mark to see if we should lend him, I think it was something like £8,000 to start his first van with his Canadian franchise. So it was heady days at NatWest when credit scoring was a guide rather than a mandate. Mark didn't really meet any of the credit scoring criteria because he'd been a rugby player. He'd been out in France for years, but he persuaded me that it was a good business and worthy of finance. So we started off as a bank manager customer for 4 years, and Mark used to, what I really liked about Mark is he used to come into the bank regularly and ask for advice, ask to build his own knowledge and skills on being a business owner. And then after 4 years, my situation changed. I was going through a divorce from a guy that worked at the bank as well. So I wanted to be out of the bank for obvious reasons. Happened to mention it to Mark, and Mark came back the next day and offered me a job. So in November 2000, I left as a single mum. I left a 21-year career at NatWest. My parents thought I was nuts. Went to work for this customer with a small business. And between 2000 and 2004, I was Mark's recruitment manager for the Canadian brand. So I learned all about franchising. I learned all about our industry, about smart repairs. And in 2004, when Mark was in the process of moving away from that Canadian brand, he offered me shares in the new business in Revive. And 21 years in banking doesn't make you a natural entrepreneur. I was still a single mum. I was still quite nervous of being self-employed, but I remortgaged my house, to put £25,000 on my mortgage, put it into the company, and Mark and I started Revive together. So yes, something I never thought I'd end up doing, certainly not in the automotive trade. Often people ask me how I got here and I go, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but you know, something worked. And Mark and I, with that knowledge of the industry, working together, the trust that we had in each other's abilities, I think we were able to decide what we wanted Revive to be, and how we wanted to grow our brand. So that was 20 years ago. So whether or not we can get 20 years worth of business into a 45-minute podcast, I don't know. But yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
Well, we'll certainly do our best. And I think, I mean, interestingly, I didn't know about the Canadian brand. So I just remember you literally at the franchise exhibitions as Revive, Mark. And I think I said beforehand, I remember talking to you and you were very chilled and laid back and comfortable and just really, I guess, confident in terms of the offer that you had, which was great. And also you weren't in any hurry to recruit. But did you have franchisees as part of the Canadian brand that you took over to Revive with you? And if you did, how did that work and how was that journey?
Yeah. So yeah, I think there was 38 franchisees with the Canadian brand, and we invited them all to rebrand to Revive. It was part of the agreement Mark had with his master franchisor in Canada, and we were disappointed when only about half of them did. So I think some of them thought that was the time to, you know, get away with a royalty, not have a royalty. Interestingly enough, none of the ones that didn't come with us, I don't think any of them are still in business or stayed in business for very long. So yeah, we moved about 17 across. And I was telling somebody yesterday, my first year in business, having been a bank manager for 21 years, our first financial year, we declared a loss. I think it was £16,000. And it was to do with rebranding costs, because we paid for those 17 franchisors to rebrand the vans, new uniforms, new invoices, everything that needed. So yeah, it was an interesting start for Revive.
Yeah, and I think as well, you know, it's a really good learning, because some of the things we've always, as you said, Julie, we've always tried to do things ethically. So recruiting lots of franchisees who fail is an easy thing to do, but doesn't give you sustainability, doesn't really create a franchise model. So so we've never looked at that. But one of the things that we were aware of, I mean, rebranding is a process in itself, and there's a huge amount of learning to go through that. So and you know, communications have to be really, really on point with that. But some of the flaws in the business, if I can put it that way, or some of the learnings for the business, at that time we didn't have, for example, a national account program or anything like that, a real tangible hold on franchisees. So franchisees could say, well, I know how to paint cars, so why don't I just go and do it myself? The way the business has evolved, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about the support that we do, the way the business is evolved now, it really is a strong partnership with franchisees where the brand creates work for the franchisees. And any franchisee, I wouldn't be concerned now with a franchisee moving away from the brand, because I think we offer an awful lot, and there would be a significant wrench from the sales that we produce both nationally and through our website to the network. I think this really shows the power of a brand, and it's something that we've been really focused on since we've started Revive.
Right, yeah, and I know that one of our previous guests that we were talking about, Melvin Lusty, and I know that he was obviously involved with your business for a time, he used to say that in essence he got franchisees to sign the franchise agreement because that's what you do, but he didn't get them to sign it till the end of the induction training, because he said to them, you know, you've been through the training, do you still want to join us? He wanted people to be with the brand because he wanted them to be with the brand. And if they wanted to leave, largely, you know, he wouldn't make anyone stay with it. It's all about the commercial benefits that the franchise brings, rather than the fact that they've signed the legal agreement and therefore they've got to stay with you, basically. Yeah, so that's really interesting. And in terms of, apart from the rebranding, were there any other changes that you made, you know, to the legal structure, to the agreement, to anything else involved in the business, as if you're like moving away from the kind of Canadian model?
Well, as I said, I really felt that we could offer more. We saw the opportunity that there was in the UK, and I think the opportunity almost every year, even now, I think the opportunity is bigger than ever. It's ridiculous, you know, because there's so many cars on the road. But I think that some of the previous ideas that were about keeping costs down, keeping a small office and all this type of thing, we're now the biggest company in our sector by a long way, and in the next few years we could be double the size of our nearest competitor. We've done that because we are growing, because we're exploiting the opportunity, and you can't do that just through keeping costs low. So, you know, sometimes we put our neck out to grow our business, and we're really ambitious about where we're going and what the opportunity is. So, you know, taking the shackles off, having the ability to really move forward, I think, you know, bringing work to the franchisees is really, really useful. But again, having Mel work with us for a little bit of time, you know, I think Mel's business was very strongly built with national contracts. And I think some of the things Mel talked to us about, he wouldn't necessarily do things in the same way, with that pressure of almost driving all the work, because that's not where we want to be. So having work coming into the franchisee moves them in the right direction, allows them not to stagnate, because one of the dangers at any level of a business is franchisees getting into a comfort zone. You know, if somebody has earned 20 or 30,000 pounds or 50,000 pounds and now they're earning 100,000 pounds, why do they want to do any more? And that's always a challenge for a franchisor. So because we are constantly growing, franchisees can't stagnate. They've got to keep growing with the brand. Otherwise somebody else will be doing that work, because we've got constantly work coming in. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, but we see the opportunity out there, and we're up for achieving these things.
Right. I mean, we've got a few people on the call today that are literally in the early stages of their franchise development. We've got a few people, clients of ours, who are just really in the launch phase. Based upon your experience of working through for the first few years, what words of advice would you give to the newbies that are on the call today?
So yeah, so starting up from scratch, I mean, gosh, we've learned so much over 20 years. And while we didn't change the model hugely when we went from the Canadian master to Revive, I think it's fair to say that we've evolved a lot over 20 years. So I think when you start off, I think understand what your non-negotiables are. We created our values. So Revive is a business underpinned by values, integrity, outstanding customer service, technical excellence, and unity. And they're our non-negotiables. They're the things that have stayed with us for the whole of the 20 years and part of our brand and part of our culture. And then when you recruit franchisees, make sure they understand that culture. We talk a lot about fit, and we want people who get us, who are excited about the opportunity and excited about the brand and excited about the culture. So if you do a lot of work early on what your culture and your values are, I think then you've got the platform to sort of build and grow from that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's understanding why you're doing franchising. You know, what are your objectives with franchising? You know, for me, it was always to grow a national business. While I started on the tools as van number one, I wasn't interested in painting cars. That's not my skills. And when I talk to people who know me again about, you know, I spent 3.5 years in a van painting cars, they say, how on earth did you do that? Because then I'm not particularly patient and not particularly good with my hands, but it was a good learning and necessary at the start to bring me income in. But so for me, it was about growing a national business, and I saw franchising as a way to do that quicker than otherwise. And the sector that we're in is an interesting, and as I said, that the more we are in this, the more opportunity there is. So I think that new people understand why you're getting into franchising. I think the other thing is to your initial franchisees will be really, really important to show that the business can succeed at arm's length. So it's extending the pilot from whatever you're doing with the initial franchisee to the first 5 or 10 franchisees. That first part of the growth is really important to make sure that the business model can be successful.
And are your first franchisees, are any of them still with you?
Yeah.
One of our first Revive franchisees refuses to sell his whatever 2006 van or 2004 van, and it's going to be in a museum soon. Yeah.
We still have a lot that sort of, particularly in that first sort of 3 years, we've still got quite a few, and they're doing really well, which is you know, it shows we're doing something right, I suppose, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose, you know, based upon what you've just said, particularly in terms of the values, then as part of your process of bringing people into the business, I guess you have turned people down, or you do turn people down, you continue to turn people down. And again, you know, that's difficult to do when you're a new franchisor, but the benefits of that are reaped in the future.
Yeah, I think you've got to be aware that bringing on a wrong franchisee can cause you a lot of pain, emotionally and financially. That it is really difficult sometimes, but that doesn't mean that all franchisees will succeed, because it's very difficult for that to happen. You know, the job of a franchisor is to create a business system and to evolve that business system. You know, continually evolve. Doesn't need to revolutionize it, but to continually evolve that business system to make it better. And some of the initial franchisees that new people have, some of the initial franchisees that we have, may not last the journey, because, you know, our business now is very different to where it was 20 years ago. Our model has been evolved quite significantly, and so the type of person that we're looking for now is very different to the type of person that we were looking for 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I think sorry, Terry, you go on.
I was going to say, because early on that was my role within the business, to recruit franchisees. I can honestly say I've never recruited a franchisee who I thought wasn't going to succeed. What I did do regularly, and more so early on, is I used to take it very personally if then when I recruited somebody, then they didn't do as well as I thought they were going to be. And, you know, it really makes you sort of work hard to help them succeed. So again, one of the lessons is not everybody will be successful, because ultimately you can have the best model, the best training, the best brand, and then something can either happen in the franchise owner's life that changes, or they may not enjoy it as much. You know, things can change that are outside your control. So I think as franchisor, we have to be the best we can be as franchisor to recruit ethically and make sure that new franchisees coming into the network understand what good looks like and understand the expectation of them, then work hard with them But ultimately, yeah, if you're relatively new to franchising, be aware that somebody that you have recruited may along the way somewhere might not be as successful, and that that can hit hard. But you learn lessons all the time from it.
Yeah, definitely. And again, in terms of the journey, you've really gone from being, and again, correct me, from being what we would call in the sector a man in a van franchise to being a management franchise, which is, what we would describe you as now, with franchisees having multi-van operations. When did that happen, and what were the challenges around that, and how did you manage that transition?
Well, I think right from day one, we saw ourselves as a management franchise. So the way that we did that is we started as a man in a van, but we offered really big exclusive territories. And so our deal when we were recruiting franchisees was saying, we are going to teach you how to paint the cars, but your territory is big enough to have at least 5 vans. So we want you over a period of time to grow and pass on that knowledge and become a manager. And what we found is some of them did that and they did it really well. And some of them tried it and didn't enjoy it and went back to being a man in a van. And we ended up with a real sort of like 2 tiers of franchise owners, really. The people that stayed a man in a van and the ones that were ambitious. So in about 2018, I think it was 2019, we decided to change the model so that we would not teach the franchisee how to paint the car. So they couldn't go back to, well, I've lost a tech, so I'm going to go back in the van. So we actually changed our model. So we didn't teach them how to paint the car. They started with 2 techs. The investment level went up a bit because of that. The break-even point moved further away, because they used to, man in a van can break even and make a profit in month 1. But obviously, if you start as a manager with 2 vans, it sort of takes a little bit longer. So we changed then in about 2018, 2019. Obviously, COVID in the way didn't help us with our change. But yeah, we've now successfully got a number of, I think last year we recruited, I think it was 7 franchise owners into our network, all on that new model, and we're doing that again this year.
And I think there are always challenges when this was quite a big evolution of the business, but what we saw was that our strong franchisees who are man in a van, and it comes back to following what I did, but I think we didn't realize how easy it was for me to get out of a van because I didn't want to paint cars. So it was get in a van, paint cars, grow a business, get a few, and then get out. That's what I wanted to do because I wanted to grow a national business. What guys could do was quite get 4 or 5 vans going with themselves in a van and earn a nice living from that financially. And so we had all sorts of blockers come in with franchisees saying, I'll just paint when the guys are on holiday. And if they had 5 people, that was like 20 years, 25 years, 25 weeks a year. So half a year they'd be painted. So and so with all these blockers, so we said, we've got to change this because we see the growth that happens when guys get out of a van and they work to develop their business. They become a leader or a manager. So that's what we were looking for rather than people who wanted to paint. And so the key change was around the mindset, and it did take a little bit of time, but we saw franchisees wanting to do that. But really it became, because of the size of the opportunity, it became inevitable that we had to change and to meet the opportunity that was there. And once we got 1 franchisee to do that, then we got 2, then we saw a real snowball effect. To the point where that's happened with the sales that they're currently doing. We've now got £4 million franchisees, and it could be as many as 7 or 8 this year. But it's gone 1, 2, 4 over the years, and 7 or 8 this year. And that's the difference that we could see. But I think every change will meet challenges. But there's Cantor's law that says anything can look like a failure if you're halfway through. So we just persisted. We knew what we wanted to do. We knew what bigger franchisees could achieve, but we knew we needed to make changes to help these guys change from being a really good painter to being a leader or a manager.
Right. And in terms of support for franchisees, what does your franchise support look like now? How does that work? How's it delivered?
We support in so many ways. It's at our last conference we had a chart, like a spider chart, showing all the different ways. So so forgive me if I don't remember all of the different stuff we do, but so to start off, we do management accounts, monthly management accounts for franchise owners. So again, picking up from when Mark was in a van, I can remember him saying really early on, the last thing he wanted to do was go home at night after being busy with the business and have to do paperwork. So we do monthly management accounts, and by doing monthly management accounts for all our franchisees, we then gather key performance indicators, financial KPIs, and we can then advise a franchisee if one of their KPIs is perhaps out of sync with another, so we can help them financially. We also, as part of that, we've over the last 8 years, we've spent probably £3.5 million on IT. So we've got an IT platform that's all integrated, that does invoices at point of sale. So 3 times a day there's invoices emailed out to customers, and we can collect our sales information more or less live. And that's linked to a CRM with customer data. We've provided a platform where franchisees can provide quotations to retail customers, manage the diaries. We're onto journey planning, all because of this investment in IT that's grown and grown and grown and grown. And our annual conference is a big part of the support. You know, it was our 20th annual conference last March, and you know, that gets everybody together, and that value of unity that we have is really felt at the conference, because they buddy up with each other. We haven't got a big network. I think it's only 50 odd franchisees, so we've not got hundreds of franchisees, but they buddy up with each other and support each other locally. I'll let you pick up from that, because I can't tell. It's to see.
I mean, it's the core of the business, and it's something that really excites us. So we don't, I don't really think of it as support. It's about, what does our business do? How does our business work with franchisees most effectively? So as Terry said, some of the stuff that we do is removing or making more efficient admin tasks or accounting processes. You know, we do the bookkeeping for our franchisees as a service. We don't really charge enough for it, but it's a service to them that allows them to drive their business forward. So, and it removes process time. So some of the work that we've done with the IT stuff, as Terry said, is fantastic. Then you've got the sales and marketing stuff. So again, because we're very aligned with the business, we've got national accounts just comes in all the time. We continue to push that. We've started looking at retail and what the brand can do with the website. It was a big initiative through COVID, and we're changing our segmentation. And so franchisees are becoming more in control of their sales, because they can control the sales. There's all the operational stuff around support around HR and health and safety and employees and stuff. And then you've got the inspiration, where we're looking at how do we inspire these guys to become better leaders and managers. And we've got our coaches that work with the franchisees to help them develop that. So as Terry said, we've got sort of like a spidergram that links all these things that we do. And it's fun. This hugely fun to look at how we can best support our franchisees. Now, whether the franchisees understand the depth of the support that we get and do is a different matter, but it really is a hugely fun and really important part of our business. But this is what we do. This is what we do as a franchisor to deliver our values through our franchisees.
Brilliant. And again, if I've understood correctly, in terms of some of the information, you know, we've done training with you, Nick's done training with you in terms of some of the network. I think you've developed almost a additional level of support for your high growth franchisees. So
Yeah.
again, if you share with us how their needs are different and how that works, and I guess what the impact is on the rest of the franchisees if they see the Platinum Brigade getting extra support that, you know, that they don't get.
Well, we launched something called our accelerated growth program, gosh, again, it must be 5 years or 6 years ago. And I think this really helped change the business from our guys who had multiple vans to understanding that they needed to be leaders. Because what we did was say to the guys, look, can you grow by 20%? And, you know, everybody put their hands up and said, can you grow by 20% for 4 years? And everybody put their hands up. And I said, if you do that, wherever you start from, you're going to double the size of your business. And they sort of all took a step back. But that was the key principle. It was about showing the guys that fast growth and growing at this rate was possible, and putting in a different structure for them. The biggest thing, honestly, the biggest thing is around the mindset. It's, you know, guys saw themselves as painters, because the majority of the guys still, while we've got the new model now, that the majority of guys saw themselves as painters or good painters, and then they would support their techs with, and this really helped us for them to see themselves as leaders of a business. And so we had a number of skill sessions throughout the year. Then they had to do a business plan, and then we took them abroad somewhere where they would present their plan to their peers, and all work, of course, during the weekend. And it worked really, really well. And what we saw over a couple of years is that the group of people on that cohort grew their business by something like 80% compared to 15% for the rest of the network.
Mm.
Wow. Okay.
It was really.
And I think it was all part of that change to really be serious about a management model. I think it was Mark that sort of said, we call ourselves a management franchise, and yet a lot of our training that we delivered was about the technical side of the business. So if we looked at our training modules and our manual, and it was very much technical based. So we had to change our mindset as to the support and the training we gave to franchisees to succeed in delivering the management module. So you know, you asked about how hard it was. It did take a few years, because we had to sort of gear up as well. But I think a lot of franchising, especially early on, is about policing the franchisee. And new franchisees now get a mentoring. We stay close to them for a few months to make sure that they understand the system. So that's more about policing. Whereas big franchisees that have multiple vans and they're turning over £1 million, they know the system. So that's more about coaching for growth and mindset. And we took on a coach just pre-pandemic as well, a couple of years ago, a guy called Ricky, who instead of I mean, he goes out and does regional meetings and peer-to-peer group meetings, but he also says to guys, if you want to access my time, you book time with me. You know, rather than us chasing after the franchise owner and saying, what can we do for you? He'll say, you book time with me. And lots of our franchisees, you know, I'll sort of raise their hand and say, can I have an hour with Ricky? Because it's much more about coaching when they get bigger.
Right. Okay. And in terms of the future, what does the future look like for Revive? What are the plans? What does 2030 look like, or how far does your planning go?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because Mr. Llewellyn is always looking at the next goal, which can be very exciting and very nerve-wracking at the same time. So I don't know, 10 years ago or so, we created a goal of £20 million sales by 2020. And I think at the time, I can't remember, sales were about £9 million when we created that goal. And it seemed like a big, hairy goal. And this year, we're going to turn over more than 22 million. So, you know, we got there. The pandemic wobbled us a little bit, but we got there. So now our new goal that we communicate to franchise owners is 40 million by 2028. It's based on this, the principle that Mark said before about if you grow by 20% year on year, you'll double your turnover in, you know, 4 to 5 years. So 40 million by 2028 is what we communicate. And now Mark started talking about 100 million because never want to stop at a figure. So yeah,
well, just looking at the size of the opportunity in the UK, I think there are multiple opportunities for people to grow businesses to 100 million just because of the size of the market. I think it's relatively untapped, and the thing that will the biggest challenge is about operationally how we do it. It's not competitive forces, because competitors could do the same thing. The market's that big. So it's really about how do we structure the business to continue the growth that we have. And I think this management franchise has been a really good decision, because I think that there will be significant growth with the franchisees.
And I think one of the big things Mark and I are thinking of as well, you know, we've been in this for 20 years. We want to bring the next tier of people that are coming into Revive, and succession planning, who are going to be our future directors, you know, our future managers, our future leaders, our future directors, because that's succession planning, and Revive being less reliant on Mark and I, and having a team around us that can run the business without us. That's our ultimate goal, to get there. But in terms of sales, we're in a really lucky situation in that in our industry there is more work out there than there are people doing the work. So it's really up to us to grab that opportunity and get to, I've put down here to infinity and beyond, because that's what we're always
Well, it's an interesting comment, because one of our other guests on First Friday, Rachel Ray, she developed Bright and Beautiful, and I think she, you know, she said plan your exit at the beginning, basically. So I think she almost had the plan in mind, that as soon as she was recruiting the first franchisee, she was planning the exit, and the whole business model and structure was geared around that. So her exit was ultimately, you know, she sold the business and moved on. But you've talked about succession planning, and, you know, who knows, I guess potentially passing over to the people within the business currently.
And it's the same for the franchisees. You know, we're getting some franchisees now who are really big, and we're having conversations with them about exit and succession planning, because the same principle for the franchisor is there for the franchisees. So yeah, exciting times.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, in terms of the questions that, you know, we discussed in advance, we've worked through the questions, so it's now open to the floor and questions from the room and the Zoom, and feel free to stick your hand up. Katrina stuck her hand up first, so Katrina will come to you for the first question, if you'd like to unmute and lead us into the question section.
Oh yeah, thanks. Really enjoyed that, and it was good to hear how you came on board, Terry, because I didn't know that, so that was really interesting, and taking that leap at that point of your life, that was. But so my question was, I loved your idea about the franchisees being a management franchise opposed to a man and a van, and stopping telling them how to paint when they first join, so that they can't sort of sneak off doing that. What are you doing about the franchisees that were the original ones who didn't move over to being a management franchise, and now they're still painting and they've got a big territory, and what are you doing about that?
Yeah, we do have a legacy of single van operatives. So what we're doing with that, obviously they're good franchise owners who cause us no problems and pay the royalty, and, you know, and paying cars. So but they I think they acknowledge, they're aware that the large territory for them is no longer an option, because we need to maximize our opportunity in the UK. So we're dealing with that normally via territory management. The franchise agreement has always contained a use it or lose it clause in the franchise agreement. Probably for 15 years we ignored that clause, but over the last 3, 4, 5 years we've been using that clause more and reducing territory.
And I think our communication with the franchisees is quite good, because I'd say that we've got sort of 3 levels of franchisees. We've got as Terry said, the legacy of single van operations. We have franchisees who are still in the van but are trying to grow, and then we've got the management franchise. The franchisees who are still in a van trying to grow understand that they don't give us any hard time about. They will say themselves, I know if I get out of a van, I could grow faster, but I'm just trying to get the cash flow right to allow me to get out to do that. So they realise. So it's quite a good situation because we don't get an awful lot of pushback. We communicate really clearly with the guys. So when there is territory reductions and stuff, franchisees are understanding about that. And we'd rather have one person in a smaller territory than nobody at all, because they will be small territories. And the next level up, the franchisees are understanding that at some point they're going to need to get out of van for themselves to help them grow the business.
And I think having a few franchisees that are doing £1 million, the ones that are single van, they know, then they've got to elect either to follow that route or to allow us to manage the territory. So we don't really have any fallouts with franchisees. It's just, that it's an honest and open conversation about their needs of their business and our needs and expectations of our business.
Right, that's good to know.
you.
Natalia, would like to come in?
Thank you, and thank you guys for sharing your story. It's fascinating as always. I suppose my question is somewhat related to Katrina's, especially with sort of management type franchises. I know that some franchisors can be nervous about having investor franchise owners who are not necessarily, who may have other business interests or not necessarily involved on a sort of full-time basis, or might live somewhere other than the territory that they have. Are you how do you manage, do you allow that? How comfortable are you with that? And how do you manage those challenges?
Well, I mean, even our £1 million franchisees are still actively involved in the business. I think eventually it might come that they get so big that part of their succession plan is installing a managing director. It hasn't happened yet, so we're lucky that we haven't had to make that choice. But I think we'd have to have a conversation about how is that going to impact on the performance of the franchise in that territory, and to make sure that it wouldn't impact on the performance. But yeah, at the moment, Natalia, we haven't had that, we haven't had that decision to make, if you like.
And I think historically, again, I think that partnerships or something like that are always a bit tricky. Never been massively successful, and so if somebody came along as apart from this one, so you have to be quite careful with those things. We haven't come across it yet, but I'm waiting for there potentially to be something like this comes along. I think we have to look at it quite carefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, can I ask another question? Sorry, if I may.
Fire away, and then Ken, you're next. I noticed you got your hand raised up. So yeah, fire away, Natalia.
Well, I think, Terry, and I think what you've just said is, you are the two of you are unusual in terms of your partnership, and that you've been in this business together for such a long time. I mean, how do you manage your relationship? And have you sort of, if you don't mind sharing, have you had any sort of moments where you've sort of fallen out, and how have you dealt with that?
Do you want to pick that one up? Natalia, yeah, we have. We've had quite strong disagreements, but we've never fallen out for more than a day. That's never happened. I think the way that our friendship started with me being Mark's bank manager, and then I think going through the rebrand, there was a few quite challenging times with the rebrand. I think it created a level of trust. I can only speak for me. It created a level of trust between us and a friendship between us that I think has seen us through for the rest of the 20 years. And I think the good thing about Mark and I is we're very different. We bring very different things to the table, but we both know what each other is good at. So we tend not to step on each other's toes, because I think if we had been more similar, Mark's an extrovert, I'm an introvert, I'm finances, marketing and sales. I think if we'd been more similar, I think it might have created more friction. But I think the differences have brought a strength.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think we are very, very, value driven as people, and I think that we've got very similar values. So while we're different people, we've got very similar values. So ultimately, it all comes back to the value. You know, is this the right thing to do for our values rather than our personal opinion? So you know, we don't really. There's no egos around here. We've got skills. We work together. We've got trust. But I think it also comes down to we make decisions based on values rather than what one person thinks and stuff. I think that's useful.
Thank you, Ken.
Hi, I was just curious as to how you've managed the territory issue, especially in the transition from what we would maybe think of as a unit franchise to the management or the business format. Was it always because you started with large territories?
Honestly, Ken, a lot of the guys that are our legacy single van operatives, they're people that I recruited, because Kathy is our recruitment director now, but for years I would recruit, and I have looked all of those guys in the eye and said, this is a management franchise. We offer a really big exclusive territory, but in return, there's an expectation that you grow. So because there was never any secret about it, I don't find it that difficult a conversation. Don't get me wrong, some are a little bit more, you know, hurt about it than others, or argue, but nobody, I don't think anybody could look at us and say, oh, we always expected to be single van. That's what we want to be, and that's what we thought we'd be. And I think when talking to franchisees, Ken, you've got to be honest. Even it's really easy especially when you start, because you want your franchisees to like you and buy into the brand. It's sometimes easy to avoid difficult conversations, and I think that's a mistake. I think you have to have those tough conversations. So I talked about our franchise coach. He talks about territory management in peer-to-peer group meetings. So we've separated our franchise owners into groups dependent on their opportunity to grow and their turnover, and what the expectation that their turnover is going to get to in the next couple of years. And for the people that were not growing, it started right from those meetings. You know, this is what is likely to happen. You know, what we want you to do, we want you to grow, we want you to take advantage of the opportunity, we want you to expand your business, and we'll help you to do that. But honestly, if you don't, we're not going to fall out with you, but the outcome will be that your exclusive territory will be less. So it's just about being honest.
I mean, having, as you call it, the uncomfortable conversations is essential in the recruitment process. But I was just curious as to how you dealt with it, and whether or not you had a performance clause in the agreement, or it sounds as if you've dealt with it in a more relaxed fashion, but at least they understand your expectations.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Loads of notice, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, Ken. This isn't about. Julie talked about Melbourne before. It's not about bringing out the franchise agreement and saying you can't do this because of this. It's a very pointy way. We know, and as Terry said, because Terry's had those conversations early days saying you're coming into a franchise that expects you to grow. Well, franchisees can't turn around after 10 years or whatever and not growing and say, well, you know, you never told me that. It's not a conversation that comes up. So expectations are set. We've been perhaps gentle on those expectations and haven't forced those, but when it comes along and they see that the business is growing, that they can't really turn around and say, well, you're not doing what you should be doing, because that would be silly. So there's no silly conversations. It's an adult conversation with people who know that they're not really playing to their part of the bargain, and if we wanted to, we could terminate. But we're not choosing that route. We're choosing a route to reduce their territory. So the conversations are honest. They're sometimes uncomfortable, but we're clear about what we're doing. And the franchisees ultimately, because we've got decent relationships with the majority of our franchisees, that they understand that actually they are hindering our progress towards 40 million. You know, if they're saying to us, look, this year my business plan says I'm not going to grow, we're like, well, how are you helping us towards our 20% year-on-year growth and our 40 million target?
Yeah,
So,
and I think certainly from the kind of viewpoint that we take, you know, the key point that's come through from the conversation today in relation to that for me is that your agreement, your legal document matches your operational model.
Yeah.
And, you know, our edit are very much around the jigsaw has to work together. Your operational model, your financial model, and your legal model have to all integrate and work together. And there's no point having an operational model that does one thing. If you hadn't had that clause in your agreement that gave you the ability to change the size of the territory, you know, it would be a different conversation. It would be a different business, basically. So right from the beginning, by good luck, good fortune, good planning, whatever it was, you've had that document well drafted, and it's enabled you and allowed you to match the agreement, the legal brief, to the operational brief, to the financial brief as you've continued to grow, and it's given you that flexibility to do that.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one final quickie in terms of the agreement? Has the way that the business has developed had any impact or influence on the term of the franchise agreement? In other words, typically, I guess it would be 5 years. Have you tended to go maybe towards 7 or even longer?
No, we've kept it at 5, Ken.
Right. Interesting.
Katrina?
Thanks.
There, sort of like, I think one of the themes that's come up, particularly during the Q&A, is how, because you put things in place right from the very beginning, it's made the journey kind of easier, I suppose, sort of good practices and so on. Do you think that, I suppose it's a question more for Mark, I suppose, do you think that came from your experience that you had before with the Canadian franchise, that you learn sort of like, you know, their mistakes?
Yeah, I think that 10 years of running a franchise with a Canadian franchisor, and being able then to start again almost with a blank piece of paper and look at all the things that hadn't been done as effectively, is really a useful thing to do. Although I'm not recommending that everybody does that.
Don't try it at home.
But yeah, but for us, you know, it was very stressful at times to do something like that. But yeah, there's definitely a load of learning, you know, because but yeah, setting the table straight in the first place is really important, and I think that's what we've done. And when you get to this stage now, we're in a really good position, and franchisees understand their role, they understand what we're doing. I think the gel currently with the franchisees is very strong.
And how we recruit franchisees, it starts right from there. You know, that we do vet franchisees. By the time a franchisee comes on board with Revive, they've met all the directors, and all of the directors have got to go, yeah, we think this person meets the criteria to be successful. So they have to present a business plan to us. They have to go through an interview. So, and all of those, they know, the franchisee knows that they're being vetted just in the same way that they are vetting us, that we are vetting them. And I think it starts the relationship well. And so it means that if later you have to have a difficult conversation, it's on the, you know, it's on a good sound footing because of those, the way that they've been recruited.
Right, thank you. Joe, did you have your hand up at one point? I wasn't sure if I'd missed you out, Joe Stone. No? Okay, you're happy? Right, great, super, wonderful. Well, that's been absolutely amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you. It's been really great to get you on, Mark and Terry, and really a fabulous session, which we will put onto the website and share. There's been quite a lot of people obviously haven't been able to make it today, and I know for the first time ever, well, Simon was here earlier, Simon Wise, and he's had technical problems and he's dropped out. So we're going to do a big shout out to Simon because he'll be watching it no doubt on catch up, but he's not been able to get into the session. So yeah, we'll see you next time, Simon. And just really to remind people, let people know that the next session is on the Friday, the 14th of June, even though we call it the first Friday. It's a bit flexible in terms of when we do it, subject to other stuff that's going on. And we're actually going on to a legal topic. Russell Ford from IBB Law is the guest, and he's He's been involved with the British Franchise Association in terms of assisting with the development of the BFA mediation scheme, a new scheme that's either in the process of being launched or just been launched. And he was a guest speaker at the BFA legal event earlier on in the year, talking about basically the use of mediation in franchise disputes. And it was a really interesting session that I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed. And so we're getting him on as the next speaker in June. So we'll be sending invites for that out as well next week, and we look forward to seeing everyone then. As that brings us to the end of the session, thank you for everyone for coming and attending the event, and hopefully everyone's found it as enjoyable as I have, and certainly again great learning, which is what we're all about. And we look forward to seeing you all at the next event in June. Thank you very much, and thank you, Terry and Mark, again.
Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.